Christmas morning 1975. Kids got gifts that made them stronger, smarter, and more independent. Christmas morning 2025. Kids get gifts that make them weaker, dumber, and more dependent. The contrast is so shocking that child psychologists are begging parents to return to these forgotten 1970s classics. But why did we abandon them? Remember when a rock became the hottest Christmas gift of 1975? Not a diamond, not some fancy gemstone, just a plain old rock with googly eyes. The pet rock phenomenon sounds completely ridiculous today, but back then, it was pure genius. Gary Dahl, the creator, sold over 1 million of these things in just a few months. 1 million. People were literally paying money for stones they could pick up in their backyard for free. But here's the brilliant part. It came in a custom cardboard box with air holes, just like a real pet carrier. The packaging even included a 32-page care manual with instructions on how to teach your rock to sit and stay. Spoiler alert, rocks are naturally gifted at both commands. Think about it this way: no feeding, no walking, no veterinary bills. Your pet rock never chewed up your favorite shoes or had accidents on the carpet. It was the ultimate low-maintenance companion for people who wanted the idea of a pet without any of the actual responsibility. Well, speaking of accessories that required zero maintenance but somehow revealed everything about your personality, these little temperature-sensitive rings became the ultimate conversation starter of the 70s. 1 minute your ring glowed blue, the next it shifted to green, and suddenly everyone thought they could read your soul like a mood-detecting crystal ball. The science behind them? Thermotropic liquid crystals that responded to your body heat. When you were calm, cooler temperatures made the ring turn darker colors, excited or stressed. Watch it bloom into warm yellows and reds faster than your grandmother could say "far out, man." What made mood rings absolutely brilliant was their perfect timing. The 70s were all about self-discovery and getting in touch with your inner feelings. These rings gave people a reason to analyze every color change like amateur psychologists. Here's the kicker, though. They didn't actually read emotions. Your body temperature fluctuates for dozens of reasons. Cold room, dark ring, hot coffee, bright ring. But nobody cared about the technicalities when they had a groovy piece of jewelry that supposedly revealed their deepest thoughts. Makes sense why they sold millions, right? They combined fashion with fortune-telling in one affordable package. But speaking of revolutionary 70s technology, wait until you hear about the camera that could develop photos in your living room. Remember when taking a photo meant waiting days to see if you actually captured the moment? Well, the Polaroid SX70 changed everything in 1972. This wasn't just a camera. It was pure magic in a folding metal box. You'd snap a picture, and within 90 seconds, a photograph would literally develop right before your eyes. No dark room, no waiting, no wondering if your thumb was covering the lens. The chemistry happening inside that little white square was more fascinating than most science experiments. But here's what made it legendary. You couldn't take 100 shots of the same boring sandwich. Film cost real money, about $1 per photo in today's terms. So every shot mattered. People actually thought before clicking. The ritual was half the fun. That satisfying mechanical whir, the photo sliding out like a tiny gift, everyone gathering around to watch the image slowly appear. Shaking it didn't help, despite what Outkast later told us, but we all did it anyway. Today's kids might have fancy phone cameras, but they're missing something crucial: the anticipation, the physical photograph you could hold immediately. Speaking of immediate satisfaction, let's talk about something that actually cooked real food. Remember when kids actually cooked real food instead of just heating up frozen nuggets? The Easy Bake Oven was basically a miniature kitchen that ran on nothing more than a light bulb. Yes, a regular old light bulb. While today's parents freak out about kitchen safety, 70s kids were whipping up tiny cakes like junior pastry chefs. Here's the crazy part. That single light bulb generated enough heat to actually bake edible treats. The temperature reached around 170 degrees, which sounds pathetic compared to your real oven's 350, but somehow those little cakes came out perfect every time. Talk about efficiency that would make modern appliances jealous. By the late 70s, over 30 million units had been sold worldwide. 30 million. That's more than the population of Texas learning to bake in miniature. Kids weren't just playing house. They were developing actual culinary skills, measuring ingredients, timing recipes, and dealing with the heartbreak of a sunken cake. The genius was in its simplicity. No complicated electronics, no digital displays, just heat, tiny pans, and cake mix packets. Plus, you gotta eat your mistakes, which beats the heck out of most learning experiences. But speaking of revolutionary 70s entertainment, wait until you hear about the gaming console that started it all. Picture this: tennis without the running, sweating, or actual skill required. That's exactly what Atari delivered in 1972 with their Pong console. Two white rectangles bouncing a square dot back and forth across your TV screen. Riveting stuff, right? But here's the thing. People went absolutely crazy for it. This wasn't just a toy, it was the birth of home gaming as we know it. Before Pong, if you wanted electronic entertainment, you had three options: watch TV, listen to the radio, or stare at the wall. Now suddenly your television was interactive. The genius was in its simplicity. No complicated rules, no instruction manual thicker than a phone book. Just plug it in and start playing. Grandparents could figure it out in 30 seconds flat. Try explaining today's video games to your 70-year-old aunt. You'll be there until next Christmas. Atari sold over 100,000 units in its first year. Not bad for glorified electronic ping pong. The best part? No charging cables, no internet required, no updates that take 3 hours to download. Speaking of simple pleasures that kept kids busy for hours, wait until you hear about the next crafty creation. Remember when kids actually made things with their hands instead of staring at screens? Shrinky Dinks were the ultimate DIY project that turned every kitchen oven into a magical shrinking machine. These thin plastic sheets looked ordinary until you colored them, cut them out, and popped them in the oven. Then the real magic happened. Within minutes, your artwork would curl, twist, and shrink down to about 1/3 its original size while becoming 9 times thicker. It was like watching your drawings go through a time machine. Kids would press their faces against the oven door, mesmerized by the transformation. The science was actually brilliant. The plastic sheets were pre-stretched, and heat caused them to return to their original molecular state. But back then, who cared about molecules? We just knew it was cooler than anything on TV. You could make keychains, jewelry, magnets, or tiny masterpieces. Every piece was unique because you created it yourself. No two Shrinky Dinks projects ever looked identical, unlike today's mass-produced everything. The best part? They cost practically nothing but provided hours of entertainment. Well, unless you count the occasional kitchen timer mishap that turned your artwork into abstract modern art. Speaking of things that twisted and turned in fascinating ways, the Rubik's Cube, the colorful little torture device that made grown adults question their intelligence while kids solved it during lunch break. Well, technically invented in 1974 by Hungarian professor Erno Rubik, this three-dimensional puzzle didn't hit American shelves until 1980. But trust me, it belongs in our 70s Hall of Fame. Here's what made this cube absolutely genius. 9 squares per side, 6 sides total, and over 43 quintillion possible combinations. That's more combinations than there are grains of sand on Earth. Yet somehow, your neighbor's 12-year-old could solve it in under 2 minutes while you're still trying to get one side right. The beauty wasn't just in the challenge, though. This little cube taught patience, critical thinking, and problem-solving skills without anyone realizing they were learning. No batteries required, no screens involved, just pure mechanical brilliance. Makes sense, right? Over 100 million cubes sold worldwide, spawning competitions, speed-solving championships, and countless tutorials. People carried them everywhere like smartphones today. The satisfying click of each turn, the frustration of scrambling your progress, the pure joy of finally seeing those colors align. But here's something that might surprise you even more than the cube's complexity. Remember when advertising promised you could grow actual sea creatures just by adding water? Sea monkeys weren't monkeys at all. They were brine shrimp with the world's best marketing team. But honestly, who cared when you could create your own underwater civilization in a fishbowl? These tiny creatures came in packets that looked more like science experiments than pet food. Add water, wait 24 hours, and boom, instant pets that didn't need walks or litter boxes. The ads showed humanoid creatures with crowns and smiling faces. Reality delivered translucent specks that swam around like confused rice grains. But here's the thing, kids loved them anyway. Over 4 million packets sold because sea monkeys delivered something magical, responsibility without the mess. No vet bills, no cleanup, just pure aquatic wonder. The genius was in the simplicity. While parents stressed about real pets destroying furniture, sea monkeys offered a gentle introduction to pet ownership. Kids learned feeding schedules and observation skills without anyone having to clean up accidents. Today's world needs more low-maintenance magic like this. Sure, they weren't the majestic creatures from the comics, but they sparked curiosity about biology and ecosystems. Speaking of things that stretch the truth in advertising, let's talk about a toy that could literally stretch across your entire living room. Meet the action figure that could practically do yoga. Stretch Armstrong hit toy stores in 1976 and immediately became every kid's favorite superhero to torture. This wasn't your typical rigid plastic warrior. This guy could stretch to 4 times his normal size without breaking a sweat. The secret? Pure corn syrup filling. Yeah, the same stuff that makes pancakes taste amazing was turning this blonde muscle man into the ultimate stress toy. Kids would grab his arms and legs, stretching him across entire rooms like some kind of superhero taffy. Makes you wonder what happened to all that corn syrup after years of aggressive stretching, right? What made Stretch Armstrong brilliant was his durability. While other toys broke after a week, this rubbery champion survived countless battles with curious children. Brothers would have stretching contests, seeing who could make him longer without snapping back. He was like the Chuck Norris of action figures, indestructible and slightly ridiculous. But here's the thing, today's kids are glued to screens more than ever. They need toys that get them moving, pulling, stretching. Modern materials could make Stretch Armstrong even stretchier and longer lasting. Speaking of things that got kids moving, let's talk about something that transformed boring rooms into groovy dance floors. Nothing screamed a 70s party like a disco ball spinning overhead, casting those magical dancing diamonds of light across every surface. These mirrored spheres weren't just decorations, they were portal machines that instantly transformed your boring living room into Studio 54. Well, minus the velvet ropes and questionable fashion choices, but here's what made disco balls genius. They were democratic glamour. You didn't need a trust fund or connections to bring that nightclub energy home. Just hang one up, flip on a colored light, and boom, your basement became the hottest spot in the neighborhood. The physics were simple, but the magic was real. Hundreds of tiny mirrors reflected light in every direction, creating this hypnotic light show that made everyone feel like they were dancing in a kaleidoscope. Kids loved it. Adults secretly loved it more. These weren't expensive either. Most families could afford to add some sparkle to their holiday celebrations. And unlike today's complicated LED systems that need apps and Wi-Fi passwords, disco balls worked with basic physics and never needed updates. The best part? They made terrible dancers look mysterious in all that swirling light. Speaking of mystery, wait until you hear about the board games that dominated family time. Remember when families actually gathered around a table instead of staring at separate screens? The 70s had something magical that we've practically forgotten. Classic board games that turned living rooms into battlegrounds of strategy and laughter. Operation had everyone sweating bullets as they tried to remove that funny bone without buzzing. One wrong move and bees, your patient was toast. Meanwhile, Risk turned mild-mannered dads into world-conquering generals, plotting global domination while mom made popcorn. "I'm taking Australia!" became the battle cry heard in suburbia. Then there's the game of life, where spinning a plastic wheel determined whether you'd become a doctor or end up bankrupt. Kids learned harsh economic lessons before they could spell mortgage. Makes sense, right? These games sold like hotcakes. Over 19 different classics dominated toy store shelves. No batteries required, no internet connection needed, just pure human interaction and the occasional family argument over house rules. But here's the kicker. They actually made people think. Strategic planning, probability, even basic math skills got disguised as fun. Your brain got a workout without realizing it. Speaking of things that challenged your mind, wait until you hear about those cozy companions that doubled as bedroom decor. Pet Pal cushions were the unsung heroes of 70s bedrooms. These weren't just ordinary pillows. They were plush companions shaped like adorable animals that doubled as both cuddle buddies and room decor. Picture this: a kid's bedroom in 1976. No smartphones, no tablets, just pure imagination and a trusty pet pal cushion shaped like a sleepy owl or friendly puppy. These cushions spark creativity in ways that would make today's interior designers jealous. What made them brilliant? They solved multiple problems at once. Need extra seating for friends? Pet Pal had you covered. Want something soft to hug during scary movies? Your cushion companion was ready for duty. Looking to personalize your space without breaking mom and dad's decorating budget? Boom. Instant personality upgrade. The genius wasn't just in their functionality. These cushions taught kids about responsibility in the gentlest way possible. Unlike real pets, they never needed feeding or walking, but they still required care and attention. Kids learned to arrange their rooms, creating little sanctuaries around their soft friends. Modern homes could definitely benefit from this multifunctional approach to comfort. But speaking of things that required a bit more skill and coordination, 2 plastic balls on a string that made a satisfying clack sound when you got the rhythm right. Clackers were basically the fidget spinners of the 70s, except they actually required skill and could knock your teeth out if you weren't careful. These deceptively simple toys became a playground obsession overnight. Kids would stand around trying to get that perfect rhythm going. Clack above your hand, clack below, repeat until your arm felt like it was going to fall off. The sound was oddly hypnotic, like a percussion section made entirely of determined 10-year-olds. Here's the thing, though. They were banned faster than you could say lawsuit waiting to happen. Turns out those plastic balls had a nasty habit of shattering and sending shrapnel flying. Who could have seen that coming? Well, probably anyone who watched kids play with them for more than 5 minutes. But here's what made them special. They actually taught hand-eye coordination and timing. No batteries, no screens, just pure physics and determination. Sure, they were basically weaponized yo-yos, but they got kids moving and challenged them to master something genuinely difficult. With modern safety materials, we could easily bring back this addictive challenge. Speaking of challenges that required actual skill, remember when your lunchbox was basically your first fashion statement? Those metal beauties from the 70s weren't just containers. They were portable billboards of your personality. Kids would strut into cafeterias carrying Superman, Wonder Woman, or the Partridge Family lunchboxes like they were designer handbags. And honestly, they kind of were the designer handbags of elementary school. The sound alone was iconic. That satisfying clunk when you set it down on the lunch table, announcing your arrival. But here's what made them genius. They came with matching thermoses that actually kept your soup hot. Not lukewarm, hot. Try finding that level of engineering in today's flimsy plastic containers that fall apart faster than your New Year's resolutions. The designs were incredible too. Over 120 different styles hit the shelves annually at peak popularity. From Star Wars to the Waltons, every kid could find their tribe through their lunchbox choice. Makes sense, right? These weren't just lunch carriers. They were conversation starters, trading cards, and status symbols all rolled into one durable package. Well, speaking of things that sparked serious playground conversations, wait until you remember what came next. Here's something that probably made your parents question their sanity back in the day. Silly putty. That weird flesh-colored blob that could do everything except what putty was supposed to do. This stuff was like magic in an egg-shaped container. You could stretch it until your arms got tired, bounce it off the ceiling, and here's the kicker, press it against comic strips to transfer the images. Suddenly, everyone became a bootleg printer. The best part? Nobody could explain why it was so addictive. Adults would test their kids' silly putty for quality control purposes, naturally, then spend 20 minutes stretching it while pretending to supervise homework. Over 300 million eggs sold worldwide. That's more eggs than some chickens produce in a lifetime. The stuff was originally developed during World War II as a rubber substitute. Talk about a career change. But here's what made it brilliant. No batteries, no assembly required, no tiny pieces to vacuum up later. Just pure, simple, tactile fun that kept kids busy for hours. In today's world of screens and notifications, maybe we need something that just sits there and lets you fidget. Speaking of things that just sat there, wait until you hear about the bouncing phenomenon that had everyone hopping mad with joy. Remember bouncing around your backyard like a kangaroo on steroids? Space hoppers turned every kid into a rubber ball athlete. These giant inflatable spheres with handles were basically exercise equipment disguised as pure fun. The genius was in their simplicity. You climbed on, grabbed the handles, and bounced until your legs gave out or your mom called for dinner. No batteries required, no assembly instructions thicker than a phone book. Just inflate and hop. But here's what made them brilliant. They solved the eternal parent problem. Kids got their energy out while actually exercising. It was like tricking children into going to the gym, except they begged to do it more. The workout was real too. Your core muscles worked overtime just staying upright, while your legs got stronger with every bounce. Modern fitness trainers charge $60 an hour for stability ball workouts that don't come close to this level of fun. Space hoppers dominated backyards throughout the 70s, turning ordinary grass into trampolines. Kids raced them, performed tricks, and yes, occasionally face-planted spectacularly. Then there's something else from this era that combined art with mathematics in the most unexpected way. Remember those perfectly round spirals you could never draw by hand? Well, the spirograph changed all that in the 70s. This wasn't just another toy. It was like having a geometric artist trapped in a plastic wheel. The concept was brilliantly simple. Drop a pen through a hole in a spinning gear, roll it around inside a ring, and watch mathematical magic happen. Kids who couldn't draw a straight line suddenly became pattern-making Picassos. But here's the kicker. Parents loved it too. While children thought they were just making pretty designs, they were actually learning complex geometric principles. Makes sense, right? It was education disguised as pure fun. The patterns were mesmerizing. Hypotrochoids and epitrochoids. Fancy names for curves that looked way cooler than they sounded. Each combination of gears created something completely different, like a kaleidoscope made of math. Over 4 million sets were sold during the 70s boom. Teachers started using them in classrooms. Art therapists discovered their meditative qualities. Even engineers admitted they were pretty neat. Today's world of digital, everything could use this analog magic. Sometimes the best creativity comes from the simplest tools. Speaking of simple tools that packed surprising power, remember when candy could get you suspended from school? Candy cigarettes were the rebels of the confection world. White sticks of sugar that let kids smoke without actually lighting anything on fire. Smart parenting or a terrible idea? Well, that depends on who you ask. These chalky white tubes came in little boxes that looked suspiciously like the real deal. Kids would strut around playgrounds, pretending to puff away like their favorite movie stars. The candy itself tasted like sweetened chalk, but nobody cared about flavor when you looked this cool doing it. By today's standards, they seem absolutely bonkers. Parents in the 70s thought nothing of buying their 7-year-old fake cigarettes. Different times, folks. Back then, doctors still appeared in cigarette ads, so candy versions seemed harmless enough. The controversy eventually caught up with them. Schools banned them faster than you could say lung cancer awareness. Parents suddenly realized maybe teaching kids to mimic smoking wasn't the brightest idea since sliced bread. But here's the thing. They were undeniably part of childhood for millions of people. Could they make a comeback as quirky historical novelties? Speaking of games that required actual skill instead of sugar-fueled pretend play, remember when games required actual skill instead of just mashing buttons? Kerplunk was the ultimate test of steady hands and nerves. This brilliant contraption looked like a clear tube filled with marbles, supported by a web of colorful plastic sticks. The goal was simple, yet terrifying. Pull out sticks without letting the marbles crash down. But here's what made it genius. Everyone held their breath during each turn. You'd carefully study which stick to remove next, like a surgeon performing a delicate operation. One wrong move, and crash! Down came 20 marbles, making enough noise to wake the neighbors. The winner was whoever caused the fewest marble avalanches. The beauty was in its simplicity. No batteries, no complicated rules, just pure tension and skill. Families would gather around this plastic tower of doom, sweating more than contestants on a game show. Kids learned patience, adults rediscovered their competitive streak, and grandparents proved they still had steady hands despite what their coffee cups suggested. Kerplunk sold millions because it delivered something rare, genuine suspense you could feel in your stomach. Every stick removal was a gamble. Every marble drop, a mini disaster. Speaking of childhood magic that transported you instantly to different worlds. Remember when three-dimensional entertainment meant more than putting on clunky glasses at the movie theater? The Viewmaster did that decades before anyone coined the term virtual reality. This little red gadget was basically a handheld portal to anywhere you wanted to go. Pop in a reel, click the lever, and suddenly you're standing next to the Grand Canyon or watching Scooby-Doo solve mysteries. The stereoscopic magic happened through simple engineering that would make today's tech engineers jealous of its elegance. Two slightly different images fooled your brain into seeing depth. No batteries required. What made Viewmaster special wasn't just the technology, it was the anticipation. Kids would collect reels like trading cards, building entire libraries of adventures. Disney scenes, national parks, cartoon characters, you name it, there was probably a reel for it. The beauty lay in its durability, too. These things survived everything from sandbox battles to being forgotten under couch cushions for months. Makes you wonder why we abandoned something so reliable for devices that need charging every few hours. But speaking of making decisions without batteries, let's talk about a fortune-telling phenomenon that required nothing more than a good shake. Remember asking the Magic 8 Ball whether your crush liked you back? Well, here's a gift that made terrible life decisions feel totally acceptable. The Magic 8 Ball wasn't just a toy, it was basically therapy for indecisive teenagers. And let's be honest, some adults too. This mysterious black sphere promised answers to life's burning questions, even though its wisdom came from a plastic die floating in blue liquid. Revolutionary stuff. But here's what made it brilliant. It took all the pressure off making real decisions. Failed a test? Ask again later. Should you break up with your boyfriend? Signs point to yes. The Magic 8 Ball had 20 possible responses, ranging from optimistic to crushingly vague. Pretty much like getting advice from your uncle at Thanksgiving dinner. The genius wasn't in the technology. It was simpler than a snow globe. The magic was giving people permission to blame fate for their choices. Millions of these things flew off shelves because everyone secretly wanted a mystical excuse for their bad judgment. Then there's something even more nostalgic that literally rolled its way into every kid's heart. When skateboards first rolled onto sidewalks in the 70s, they looked nothing like today's polished boards. These were chunky wooden planks with clay wheels that sounded like thunder rolling down the street. But here's the thing. They launched an entire revolution. Picture this. Surf culture meets concrete jungle. When waves were flat, surfers needed something to scratch that itch, so they bolted roller skate wheels to pieces of wood. Genius? Absolutely. Safe? Well, let's just say helmets weren't exactly trending back then. The beauty of vintage boards wasn't their performance. Those clay wheels had about as much grip as a politician's promise. It was the pure DIY spirit. Kids would sand their own decks, paint wild designs, and customize everything. You weren't buying a product. You were crafting your ride. Then there's the cultural impact. Over 50 million riders had hit the streets by the late 70s, turning every sidewalk into a potential skate spot. These boards symbolized freedom and rebellion. Everything parents love to worry about. Today's boards are engineering marvels, but they've lost that raw, build-it-yourself charm. Bringing back vintage-style boards could reignite that creative spark that made skating special. Speaking of engineering, though, some kids preferred building things that stayed put. Remember when kids actually built things with their hands instead of just tapping screens? Erector sets were the real deal back in the 70s. These weren't your plastic snap-together toys that break after a week. We're talking about genuine metal construction sets with nuts, bolts, and girders that could handle serious engineering projects. Kids built working Ferris wheels, cranes, and even motorized vehicles that actually functioned. The satisfaction of tightening those tiny screws with real tools? Pure magic. But here's what made erector sets brilliant. They didn't hold your hand. No step-by-step video tutorials or customer support hotlines. You got a manual with basic diagrams, and your imagination did the rest. Talk about building character along with your creations. The set sparked genuine mechanical understanding. Children learned about gears, pulleys, and basic physics without realizing they were getting an education. Compare that to today's toys that do everything for you. Where's the challenge in that? Over 50 million sets found their way into homes worldwide, creating a generation of problem solvers and innovators. Many engineers credit these metal marvels for launching their careers. Speaking of launching careers, our next 70s gift helped people keep perfect time while making bold fashion statements. Before fitness trackers turned us into walking data points, there was something way cooler on our wrists. Swatch watches burst onto the scene like colorful time bombs of pure style. These weren't your grandfather's gold pocket watch. Nope. Swatch made time-telling fun again with bright colors that could blind a disco ball. We're talking hot pink, electric blue, and patterns that looked like someone let a rainbow explode in a paint factory. But here's the genius part. They were actually affordable. While other watch companies charged enough to require a second mortgage, Swatch said, "Hold my beer," and made fashion accessible to everyone. Over 100 million units flew off shelves faster than teenagers fleeing chores. The detachable faces? Revolutionary. You could swap out designs like changing personalities. Monday called for serious black. Friday demanded party purple. It was like having multiple watches without breaking the bank or your wrist from the weight. Then there's the durability factor. These things survived more teenage drama than a high school guidance counselor, dropped during gym class, still ticking, forgotten in a jeans pocket during wash day, emerged cleaner and still on time. Speaking of timeless classics, our next throwback gift involved something that moved on actual tracks. Remember when Christmas morning meant finding an elaborate train set snaking around the base of your tree? Those weren't just toys, they were miniature worlds waiting to come alive. Vintage toy trains captured something magical that today's digital gifts simply can't touch. The careful assembly, the satisfying click of track pieces connecting, the gentle hum of a locomotive pulling its cars through tiny tunnels. Makes sense why dads got just as excited as their kids, right? These weren't the cheap plastic knockoffs you'd find today. We're talking about meticulously crafted models with working headlights, realistic steam sounds, and detail that would make a real engineer jealous. Some sets included entire miniature towns, complete with stations, crossing guards, and tiny passengers frozen mid-wave. But here's the beautiful part. They demanded patience. No instant gratification, no quick dopamine hit. Just hours of focused assembly that somehow brought families together on the living room floor. Dad reading instructions while Junior sorted tiny screws, bonding disguised as play. Well, maybe it's time we brought back gifts that require more than batteries and Wi-Fi. In our world of 5-second attention spans, perhaps what we really need under the tree is something that teaches us to slow down, build carefully, and watch our creation come to life one piece at a time.